Alexa, volume up 3. It's been a long time coming, but I know. Alexa, volume up 3. Yes, it will. It's been too hard. I'm afraid to die. I don't know what's there. You understand? It's been a long time coming, but I know change won't come. Oh, yes, it will. I go to the movie. Oh, time. Somebody will be alone. Mess around. Time coming, but I know change won't come. Oh, yes, it will. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, no, brother. And don't say, brother, let me please. Knocking me. Yeah. Let us go. Alone. Every boss, carry on. I'm coming, but I know change won't come. Oh, yes, it will. The rise of the Monroe Doctrine, the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. That's why you're seeing gold, Alexa, silver, Bitcoin being artificially inflated, then crashing, right? Because then you're destroying the economy that way. That's also why you're also seeing ICE in Minnesota, because you're trying to create a Palantir police state. They're trying to provoke as much violence as possible to justify the use of Palantir. And so this conflict right now in America between the old deep state and new deep state, between the financial elite and the tech oligarchs, is I think what best explains what's happening in America and around the world today. I'm seeing a theory that nuclear energy and the investment, I see that billionaires like Peter Thiel are investing into nuclear energy so that we don't have to rely upon oil as much. And do you believe that theory? Yeah, absolutely. So the problem with AI is that it consumes a lot of energy. So you need different energy sources. The problem with oil is that it's very expensive to transport around, and then it's also prone to geopolitical conflicts, right? So there's a war in the Middle East. Where are you going to get your oil from, right? So not only are they looking at nuclear energy, they're also looking at geothermal energy. That's why Greenland is important, right? Because Greenland is a cold place. So you're going to have like data centers in Greenland. It won't be that expensive to cool because it's already a cold climate, and there's geothermal energy. So it'd be pretty cost effective to power. Okay. So the thing about data centers, like where can we place the data centers and where would it be efficient and cheap to power these data centers? Yeah, and you can see the arrogance from which you often call hubris. I think that's a great definition. The arrogance of American empire. We've been the global empire, Americans, for so long that when we see Trump invade Venezuela,
and kidnap the president, or when they talked about taking over Greenland, Americans get super excited because they're like, yes, American empire. But that hubris distracts from the greater picture and what's really going on behind the scenes.
Right, but there's a bigger issue in that the people are the ones who are financing this empire, right? It's these poor people who have to go to war to defend this empire. It's the middle class that's paying the taxes for the military industrial complex, which is one of the most corrupt organizations in the world. It's the people who have to deal with these illegal immigrants that are coming into America because of the empire, right? Look, the reality is that people don't want to leave their homes. If their homes are being destroyed by climate change or by the war on terror, then they have no choice but to go to a new place. So you look at Europe, which has been overrun by refugees, right? Well, why? Because where are these refugees from? They're from Afghanistan, they're from Iraq, they're from Syria, they're from Libya, which is all nations that America went in to destroy for no particular reason.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a cost of empire. So you think it's a great thing to have an empire, but the vast majority of people, 99% of people within the empire, are the ones who are enslaved by it, the ones exploited by it, the ones who are financing it in order to benefit a certain elite.
Yeah, I want to ask
how they had already, and then when after 9/11 happened, you have the rise of basically the American security state, you have the rise of the American empire. So, if you go to Washington, D.C. back in 1999, if you go to the suburbs, it was pretty empty. You go to the suburbs today, right? Virginia, Fairfax County, they're all mansions. Okay, so this is the benefit of the war on terror. It basically funded the American security state, and it made a lot of people very wealthy. I was in Afghanistan in 2006, so I was part of the war on terror. I was working for the United Nations, and my God, everyone was getting filthy rich. I was a low-level UN official, but look, I saw people walking home with millions of dollars in cash. They would literally go to the UN pay office, okay, and then they begin these bundles of hundreds of dollars of bills in American cash. They were billions of dollars, plane loads of billions of dollars. We just went missing. We now know that the American soldiers were there partly to protect the poppy trade, in order to make sure that opium went to the Sackler family, which of course caused the opioid epidemic that killed thousands of Americans, right? So the war on terror. Yeah, I mean, so you just look at the evidence, and you just look at what's suspicious about 9/11, and then you look at who benefits from 9/11, and you look at how things have transpired after 9/11. Then you are forced to conclude that it was probably an inside job by the security state. And the argument is that after the fall of the Soviet Union, Americans no longer wanted to be involved overseas. They didn't care about what happened outside the world because this great threat, this communist menace, it was erased. Now we need to be friends around the world, cut back the security state, limit the Pentagon budget. And so they engineered 9/11 in order to justify the military industrial complex, which is what really goes America. Yeah.
Right. And so you are predicting that Trump was going to go to war with Iran, even though he campaigned on no new wars. And you can see the Trump MAGA base, they've switched their opinions on so much, right? Trump said on the Truth Social that he does not support anybody who wants the release of the Epstein files. Ben Shapiro, one of the biggest supporters, said that the Epstein files don't exist. Now he's blaming Steve Bannon. And so you can see a lot of his supporters, although they were promised these things during the campaign, they now have accepted his change in rhetoric, right? Especially the war in Iran, which is the biggest one. And it is probably, do you believe that the war in Iran is the catalyst to start World War III or the end times?
I do. And I think that that's where they do it. I think that people in the Pentagon know that this war in Iran, it'll be a disaster because America is not ready for a war.
Mm-hmm.
To fight a war, you need, first of all, you need manufacturing capacity, right? You need to be able to produce bullets and tanks and planes. And America offshored its manufacturing capacity to China. There's no way that China is going to produce tanks and bullets for the American military, right? Okay, so that's issue number one, manufacturing capacity. Number two is political will. And the reality is that American people don't understand why America would start a war in Iran. And Americans have no ill feelings towards Iranians. Okay, it's not like Afghanistan and Iraq, where Americans were gaslighted into believing that Saddam Hussein was responsible for 9/11, where Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. You could make a case of fight against Iraq and Saddam Hussein. It's impossible for you to make a case against Iran because Iranians have been extremely cooperative. In fact, you would argue that they got out of their way to be as peaceful as possible with America because America assassinated their top general in the Middle East, General Soleimani, which is a declaration of war. Basically, it's an act of war when you kill an ambassador, an envoy of a nation, right? But the Iranians never retaliated, they never responded really. And then you have Operation Midnight Hammer. You have all these acts of provocation, right? And the Iranians have shown tremendous restraint, and the Iranians have tried every way in order to negotiate a peace treaty, a new nuclear deal with Trump. And Trump has always rebuffed them, and Trump has always tried to provoke them. So Americans don't really understand what the problem here is, right? So the rally of the nation for a war against Iran will be really hard. I think they'll have problems with a draft, right? Because you'll need a draft in order to send troops to Iran, and which Americans are gonna go fight this war, right? And then remember, the biggest problem in Vietnam was fragging. I'm not sure if you heard the term fragging. But fragging is where soldiers kill their own officers because their officers were idiotic or incompetent or sent to their deaths because the officers wanted to rise up in the ranks. So fragging is a huge problem in Vietnam. So basically troop morale, okay? If you're going to have a problem with troop morale, you can fight this war in Iran. The third problem is just logistics, which is to say that